Hello, everyone. Peace, salam, and shalom. My name is Sophia Saeed. I am the executive director of the Interfaith Center of Arkansas, which is the sponsoring organization for this Dreams workshop. And I'm your host today. Interfaith Center is a nonprofit committed to reducing fear and prejudice among world religions. And we do that through interfaith dialogue, through promoting relationship building opportunities, and by providing education about world religions. One of a very important component of our work is teaching spiritual practices that invite people from different religion to connect with divine. And this eight-part workshop series is a part of our interfaith and spiritual explorations. We meet on Wednesdays at noon every week. Our teacher is Reverend Susan Smith, that you're very, very familiar with. Last week, we talked about experiencing divine through our dreams and actually trying to discern whether a message that we receive in our dream is divine guidance or if it's human ego. Susan taught different methods to do that. I talked about a spiritual Muslim practice of istikhara. Today, we will be talking about dreams and silence. And we have a special guest today that Susan will introduce shortly, Sister Deborah Troilette, who is joining us from Arkansas House of Prayer. Now, before we start, I want to remind you that we are recording these classes, so keep yourself on mute. I am sending you a link to all the class recordings in the reminder email that you receive on Tuesdays. In yesterday's reminder email, I sent you some extra information as well. I sent you information about in-person dream program that Dr. Chelsea Wakefield is starting. And I also sent you information about 2 workshops on silence, because today we're talking about silence. So please keep a look on the chat box in the Zoom class today, because I will be sharing all this information. The YouTube link for all our classes, the in-person dreams workshop, and the 2 silence workshop in the chat box. And if you're interested in any one of them, please feel free to ask for more information or go to the links that I've throughout the class in the chat group. So with that, I want to give it to Susan, and Susan, you can expand more on these or just start the class.
Okay, thank you so much, Sophia. So I want to remind you that the next 2 weeks are our last weeks, and that I want to stay on the call for 30 minutes after each of the classes so we can just kind of have a free-for-all discussion. So next week, we'll be talking about dreams and relationships, which I think is one of the most exciting things, because our relationships are really partly how we transform, as well as how we give and receive love. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about dreams and life after death. And that is really interesting material. So I hope you will be able to do those 2 sessions. I wanted you to know what's coming up. And after both of those sessions, I'll stay on the call and we'll just continue to discuss. So I did want you to know that I met with Dr. Chelsea Wakefield, told her what we were doing, and asked if she would consider doing a dream group. And so she's thought about it. She's written it up. You got it in your email. You can go back and look at it. So she has an office in Little Rock in the Plaza West building across from Catholic High. And the workshop, the dream group will take place there. The details of it are in your email. I know some of you all are from different states and you might want something on Zoom. So the first time through, she wants to offer it in person, but she's open to keeping a list of those of you that might want to do something like that on Zoom. So you have her contact information, and we'll discuss more about that, but I wanted you to know that there will be an opportunity to go more deeply into your personal dreams. And then I would like to introduce Sister Deborah, and I want her to tell you a little bit about, actually, I realize it's 3 experiences from the House of Prayer that are available coming up about silence. And if you're not on the House of Prayer email list, you might really want to join it, because there are amazing workshops that go on out there. So Sister Deborah Trollet is a member of the Sister of Mercy. She has been the leader of Mount St. Mary's School for many years. Then she went to work for her order on an international level, which she did for 6 years, working around the globe for the Sisters of Mercy. And now we are fortunate to have her here as the executive director of the House of Prayer. So Sister Deborah, if you will tell the group about the 3 things coming up that they could also do if they want to do more about silence.
Well, thank you, Susan, and I just appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about the programs that you may be interested in joining. I also appreciated that in the announcement to join the Zoom, those opportunities were indicated there. So you can always go back to that email. But one thing we do every Tuesday morning, virtually on Zoom from 7:30 to 8, is simply what we call practicing sacred silence. And so we've been blessed to have volunteers who are practitioners who volunteer to give a brief reflection opening. We sit for 20 minutes in shared silence, and then there's a brief closing. So that's from 7:30 to 8 every Tuesday morning for practicing sacred silence. And you can register very simply by sending an email to arkansashouseofprayer@gmail.com. The other opportunity is that starting in September, we begin what we call another session called Mornings with Sacred Silence. So the only difference is that on the second Tuesday of each month, beginning in September, we offer a program from 7:30 to 8:30. But included within that time period is a wonderful teaching of about 20 minutes from one of our really excellent teachers that have served us in that program probably about the last 18 months. Sophia has been a teacher, Susan has been a teacher. So again, the only difference is that on the second Tuesday of the month, we go from 7:30 to 8:30, and included within that hour is 20 minutes of teaching on a topic related to silence, the 20 minutes sit in silence, and then at the close, there's an opportunity for questions and answers. So those are virtual programs offered weekly, and the morning with Sacred Silence offered monthly, beginning in September. The other opportunity is just a very simple introductory workshop in person that I offer. I've been doing it quarterly. It's called Deepening Prayer, Necessary Silence. And we start at St. Margaret's in their lovely parish hall. And we do a little bit of introduction to silent prayer, the House of Prayer. We actually visit the House of Prayer within that 2-hour block, and then come back and have an opportunity for questions and answers, and just sharing anything that comes up as a result of that experience. So it's a very simple introduction to the House of Prayer, but it gives the basic information for anyone who is interested in pursuing the House of Prayer as another beautiful place to share silence, to deepen your experience of silence, and to deepen your prayer. So with that, I'll stop and hand it back to Susan.
Thank you so much. So before we go on, could I just see a show of hands of how many of you have some type of practice of silence, just some regular, it could be meditation or prayer, but some kind of daily quiet time? Sophia, why don't you scan around and just give me a rough estimate? And I'm going to, while you're raising your hands or not raising them, I'm going to keep teaching for a minute, and then Sophia can tell me. So there is a relationship between meditation and dream work. I don't understand all of it. I read this morning an article of research from the National Institute of Mental Health, because they are researching dream work as it relates to meditation. And I read an article in Psychology Today, and what I have to say about it is nobody seems to understand exactly how this works, but just that it exists. So, Sophia, about roughly how many people do we have that are involved in some kind of practice of silence?
Susan, we have 11 participants, including you and me. It makes 13, actually.
Okay, so about a third of us are already involved in some kind of regular practice. Okay, that's great. So what I have noticed in my own journey is that if I am doing my daily meditation with some regularity, that I also am having better dream recall. And I'm also having sometimes, this is not every night, but sometimes I'm having richer and potentially more helpful dreams. Why this is, I don't know. I will give you my personal theory. I think that each of us have our own soul, our true self, our essence that has never left the divine. And I think that soul is vibrating at a particular frequency. And it's not the frequency of everyday life, of pulling weeds out of a garden and going to the farmer's market and taking a sick dog to the vet, all wonderful things, but that's a different vibrational frequency. And I think meditation helps take you into the physiological vibrational frequency of your own soul and your connection with the divine. And the dreams, as we've talked about, these dreams we are not in control of our dreams. They are coming from something bigger than us. And part of the reason they're so helpful is because we can't control them. A little quote that I saw said, most of this stuff I say is true because it comes from my dreams, and I don't have the presence of mind to make up lies while I sleep. So the dreams are coming from a truth-telling energetic field, and our own soul is connected to that, and meditation connects us to it. So it's almost like meditation is just taking you closer to your own truth, your own soul, your own essence, your connection with the divine, and that they both enhance each other. So let me stop there. And I want to see if there are just any questions at this point about anything before I do any other teaching. So just take a minute and check in with yourself and see if there's any question that you can think of.
Lori, do you have a question, or is the hand raised from the previous meditation question? Susan,
I'm sorry, it's from the previous question.
Okay, that's okay. I'll raise. Susan, we have Grace. Grace has a question.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I had really not tried much like meditation, I guess you would say guided meditation, where you have someone talking and guiding the session. But I wondered what you thought about, I mean, I have read that meditation can take different forms. And when I go for a walk, I usually go by myself, and I don't have earphones. I usually don't talk on the phone. I'm just out in nature by myself. And I consider that a form of meditation. I wondered what you thought about it.
I mean, I absolutely think it can be a form of meditation. So meditation is whatever works for us to quieten the chattering mind, even for 2 split seconds. For me, lately, I've been doing more outdoor swimming. And if I get into a zone and quit thinking and planning and making lists while I'm swimming, if I allow myself to go into a zone, then for me, that's also meditation. So The only distinction that I would like to make is there's a type of prayer where you're talking to God, and there's a type of prayer where you're listening to God and you're trying to go into a receptive gear of just silence. And if walking takes you into it, yes. Anybody else?
I have a question, Susan. Did we say what time the dream group starts or what days?
Yes, it's in an email that you got yesterday.
Okay, got it.
start-
Okay, I'll look at it.
Yeah, it's going to start in early September. It'll be one night a week for 8 weeks, and it's going to be from in Chelsea Wakefield's office in the Plaza West building, and you'll find all that.
Okay, thank you.
Lillian, if you look at the chat box in this Zoom, I have put all that information, including the dates and how to contact
So any other
Dr. Wakefield, and the topics and the themes, everything.
questions about the dream group or about meditation or just any other general thing? It's a lot of information already, a dream group thing and 3 workshops and the connection between the dreams and meditation. Let's just sit together for another minute or so in silence and see if anything else comes up that you want to say. So a message just came in about from Erin Wood, one of our participants, that we, I mentioned that we can't control our dreams, but she read a book about lucid dreaming. Do you have any thoughts on taking control of your dreams? So I have a friend who's been involved in lucid dreaming for many, many years. I actually have 2 friends. And I respect them, love them, treasure them, and trust what they're doing. So lucid dreaming is when you make an effort, and you can find books on this and a lot of stuff about it online. You make an effort to become aware while you're dreaming that you're in a dream. And then if you wake up and you realize, if you become conscious in a dream that you're dreaming, then you can make some effort to shape the dream into a different opportunity. So I don't know anything about it personally. I respect it. I think it's real, and I don't know very much about it personally. So that's really all I have to say about it at this point. The people that I know that have been involved in it, it happens to them on occasion, and they have found it to be an interesting phenomena. And the article from the National Institute of Mental Health that I read has a section in there on lucid dreaming. So I don't know a lot about it. So that's all I know. Having regular dreams and meditation has kept me ridiculously busy trying to keep up with what I'm hearing from that, but I respect it. So Tina Bodiak wants to say something.
I think we addressed this last week when we were talking about prayers, but say a little bit more, if you can, about incubating dreams.
Well, there's something about meditating that helps you incubate dreams, even if you're not trying to. And how and why and how that works, I don't know. I just know it does. And then, we've talked before about asking before you go to bed for God's help in a dream. And then Sophia has talked about a practice where you're asking again and again for guidance through a dream. And then later today, Sophia's going to do some teaching about a Sufi technique for incubating dreams. So the process that I know is prayer before going to bed, and also meditation seems to be incubating them. The other thing that we talked about earlier that seems to really change your dreams is once you get enough skill to see how the dream guides you in daily life, your dream recall escalates. It's like the soul or the divine or both are like, oh my goodness, he's listening or she's listening. Or, oh, she can now speak French. I can speak to her in French. Okay, here we're going to go. We're going to speak in French. It's like a language. Dreams, the language of the soul. Once you start to understand the language of the dreams, you're going to be cooking. You're going to wish you're in Chelsea's dream group. It's going to be so many dreams. And they're interesting and they're important. So you don't have to get every dream right. You don't have to figure out every dream. If you figure out 2 dreams a month, it will change your whole life. That's the truth. If you figure out 2 dreams a month and you figure out how to live into those dreams with your actions, your life will change. So anybody else before we go on for a little more teaching? Okay. So the next part, I'm going to give you 2 examples of times where dreams and meditation have gone back and forth and helped each other. One is kind of a gentle example of something that's happened to me in the last week. And the other is an extreme example of maybe stuff that only happens 2 or 3 times in a lifetime, but they're both real, and dreams and meditation were both used and worked together for God's purposes. So many of us in this group have had a wonderful friend named Helen Porter. Anyway, Helen passed away about a year ago. And this week I was sitting in silence in the early morning on an upstairs deck before the sun came up, just holding silence as long as I could hold the silence without thinking. And I could feel how much I was missing Helen. So that just came in the silence. That night, I had a dream that I was in a little enclosed space with Helen. It was kind of like a closet, but the walls weren't solid. The walls were kind of an energy field. And at first, Helen tried to communicate with me with words. And I either couldn't understand them or couldn't remember them from the dream. I don't know which it was, one or the other. And then after that, the next thing that happened in the dream is that I was near Helen's energy of how she is now that she's in heaven. And my experience was that she was in a level of happiness and joy that's very, very hard to even describe. So in silence, I felt the missing. That night, there was the dreaming. And then the next day, I decided that I would circumambulate or go around in the silence the energy of that joy that she is in right now. So a missing in the silence, a dreaming in the night that opened it up, and a sitting with it. And I think that both connects me to Helen in heaven. I think it blesses me with her love. I think it predicts for me what heaven is going to be like. And I think it helps me find a place in me that is already in that joy, whether I can remember it or know it every minute or not. So that's what I would call a soft example of that has happened this week, where there's interaction between the dreams and the silence. A more bizarre and unusual example, but still real, about 10 years ago, I'd already gone to India a few times, and I started dreaming at night that I was going to be going up in the Himalayas on the border between China and India, near where Tibet is. And in the dreams, I would see Buddhist prayer flags and Buddhist wheels, and I knew I was at a monastery. And so these dreams went on for weeks. This was not like one dream where spirit said, you are now going to da da da. It wasn't like a printed out document. It was a discussion that was started between the divine and me. And it took weeks. And I didn't just immediately say, oh, great, I can't wait. It was a process. And eventually I started doing research on the internet. Where are the monasteries all along the border between China and India? And the dreams went on, and the internet research went on, and the prayer and the meditation and me saying, show me. And eventually I had a dream where two people that I love gave me a present, and it was a tiny animal. And he was a baby. He looked like a little furry chipmunk or something, but he was a baby Tawang, Tawang. Tawang is one of the cities that I had found on the border where there's an old monastery. And I was trying to figure out, am I going to Sikkim or Nepal or India to this monastery, blah, blah. So all of a sudden, I think Spirit got the idea, okay, she's willing to go. She's listening. You have her attention. So I then started researching Tawang. Short story is that when the Dalai Lama escaped from Tibet when he was young, he went to this ancient monastery in Tawang and stayed there for a while. So it's very old, it's very privileged, and it's extremely difficult to get there. That is a whole nother story, which we won't go through. But getting there is not a recreational activity, and neither is getting out of there a recreational activity. And a lady wearing pearl earrings and fancy glasses does not look like she could even get up there. But anyway, it happened. I went. So I then do what I'm told, and I go. Too many stories. We don't need to hear them. Long story short, I was up there for about 2 weeks, and I went to the monastery every day to meditate. And those days completely changed my meditation life. Learning to meditate to begin with was not easy for me. It took me a long time. And eventually I learned how to have quiet. While I was in that monastery for 2 weeks, for reasons that I'm not clear about, I have no idea why, but my whole meditation life changed. I was able to go more deeply into the silence and stay in it for much longer than I could ever have imagined without being asleep and without thinking. So something happened that Spirit knew was going to happen by getting me into that monastery to sit in all that silence. So after I had been up there about a week, I was awakened in the middle of the night with a dream at 3:30 in the morning. And the dream, somebody said to me in the dream, get up and meditate and pray, and your whole life is going to change. And my only thought at that point was poor Rick Smith, my husband, who's already had put up with a lot by some of these adventures. And anyway, I get up and I do a very long meditation, just listening. And a long story short, eventually I heard some being say to me, evil has gone into all the world's religions, and it's teaching them to hate and fear each other. We want you to start an Interfaith Institute to help this. Go talk to Chris Keller, who's an Episcopal priest. What I said back was, I've just finished helping the House of Prayer get going. I don't want to do anything else. I don't want another project. I don't want to start anything else new. So I'm arguing back with Spirit saying, look for somebody else. And eventually the other side says, well, what were you planning to do with the rest of your life anyway? And I thought, I think I better pay attention to this. Long story short, I come back. It takes me 2 months to want to go talk to Chris Keller. I go talk to him. He's an Episcopal priest. He was directing a program that had 4 goals. One goal was interfaith. He said, I have nobody to work in that area. Would you work in that area? And I said, if you find $10,000 for me to have an administrative sidekick, I will get started. And that administrative sidekick was Sarah Catherine Gutierrez, who helped me get stuff started for the Interfaith Center that Sophia has actually brought into fruition as a full-fledged contributor to our world. So that is a 2 or 3 times in a lifetime event, but it still happened through meditation and dream work. So we can get big messages through meditation and dream work. We can get little ones, like the thing with Helen was more simple, more gentle, more understandable to me. The thing with Taiwan was more exotic. It sounds very exotic to tell about it. Getting up there was not exotic, and getting out of there was not exotic. And living in the situation that I live, sometimes big things happen, sometimes little things happen, but they're all important in our journey. And meditation and prayer work hand in hand. So what we're going to do, 5 minutes introducing a simple meditation technique. And then we're going to meditate together. And why don't we do it for 10 minutes? And I will be our timekeeper, Sister Deborah, so you don't have to worry about it. I'll keep up. When you get through teaching, I'll keep up with the 10 minutes. Then what we're going to do after that is Sophia is going to share with us an Sufi Muslim technique related to meditation and dream work. So, Sister Deborah, thank you so much for being present and giving us an introductory meditation technique.
Well, thank you very much, Susan. I will just briefly introduce the centering prayer method as a technique to help us quiet our minds and really be present to the presence, you might say. It was primarily developed by a Cistercian monk, Thomas Keating, in an effort to renew the Christian tradition around meditation and contemplation. So he wanted to present this ancient teaching in an updated form, and he wanted to put a certain order to the method in order to make it available to many, many people. So it is from the Christian perspective. So I just will teach from that perspective, but hopefully you're able to make the translation to your own faith tradition or perspective. So there's just 3 things I want to touch on, and then we can practice. First of all, prayer as relationship. Prayer primarily is about our relationship to God. In the Christian tradition, many of us were taught only how to pray with words. We were taught to raise our hearts and minds to God, but we were doing most of the work with our own words or with memorized prayers. So basically, when we say, let us pray, we're basically saying, let us have a relationship with God, or let us continue our relationship with God, or let us deepen our relationship with God. The second thing is just in the method itself, we do less. We show up, we open up, we consent to God's presence and action within our own heart. And that is the practice so that we can be better disposed to receive the gift of God's grace and relationship. So it's what Susan already referenced. It's a more receptive prayer. And again, it's a prayer of openness, receptivity, consenting, and pure faith to whatever rises or doesn't rise in the prayer. So what does the method do, so to speak? Well, it's designed to help facilitate what we call resting in God, a way of reducing this busy, chattering mind with all its reflection, so that we can have one simple movement, you might say, of consent, a method that can help us quiet the mind so that we can listen and receive the gift of contemplation and this deeper knowledge of the divine. So, in summary, I'll just say centering prayer is both this idea of relationship with the divine, and it's also a discipline to help foster further development of that relationship. But in this case, when we say discipline, we mean full service, that we are in total service to do this in love and in service. So let me just give a few guidelines, and then I'll turn it back over to Susan to invite us into the silence. Father Keating recommends the choice of a sacred word, a simple 1 or 2 syllable word. It's not a holy word by virtue of the word we choose. It's a sacred word because of our intention behind the use of this word. It's simply a symbol that signals our intention to return to this disposition of openness and receptivity. Any moment we notice that we have engaged a thought, a feeling, a reflection, a memory, whatever rises in our consciousness, the word is just our way of signaling our desire to return to this basic, simple disposition of openness and receptivity. And so we choose a word, 1 or 2 syllables, or if you don't want a word, you can simply return to your breath, return to awareness of your breath. Each time you notice, you engage. One little example I use is, you're watching the news and you're hearing the news reporter, and then all of a sudden the ticker tape goes across the bottom of the screen, and bingo, all of a sudden you notice you've engaged that message. So again, anytime we notice that we've engaged with a thought, it's not an aggressive way to get rid of it. It's a simple, very gentle returning to the word as a way to, again, open ourselves and quiet ourselves to listen. So you choose the word as a symbol of your intention to consent to God's presence and action within. It's a way to let go of whatever rises. And then you simply sit comfortably with your eyes closed. You settle briefly. You introduce this word, 1 or 2 syllables, or you notice your breath. And then again, when you notice that you've engaged a thought, a memory, thoughts it's kind of an umbrella word for any perception that comes into consciousness, whether it's a word, a memory, a thought, a feeling, a sensation, whatever, because your mind is going to keep working, but your intention, you are more than your thoughts. So that's the opportunity that you have through this method. And then for whatever time period, and Susan will keep the time today, she will invite us into the silence and then let us know at the end of the period. And then the recommendation is simply to rest a few more moments in that silence before you kind of re-engage with all your senses. So with that, I think I'll stop and then just hand it back to you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Sister Deborah. And we hope that if you haven't visited the House of Prayer, that you will visit. The space that you're in can affect your meditation life. So if you're new to meditation or you've tried a few times and you're frustrated, just be really gentle with yourself. It took me a long time to get it, but it's like riding a bike. Once you learn to quieten your mind, it gets easier and easier. So what you can expect if you're new is a lot of chattering, and then you go back to your word, and then a lot of chattering. And I think eventually the chattering mind gets bored and takes a little 2-second nap, and you have a little second of quiet. So enjoy practicing, and I will let you know when the 10 minutes is up. Please take a moment and gently turn your attention back to the room, to any sounds that you hear or any breeze, to your shoes on your feet, to the clothes that you're wearing, to the chair that you're in. And just gradually bring your attention back to this physical reality. And we will have time when we meet next week. We'll have that extra 30 minutes afterwards where we can talk more about what are some tricks or aids or assistances that might help you allow the chattering mind to give you a few seconds of really deep silence, or a few minutes. I'm really happy when I can get a few seconds. So be gentle with yourselves, be modest in expectations, and keep trying techniques and processes until you find a technique that really works for you. So now I'm going to ask Sophia to teach us about the Sufi Muslim practice of dhikr. So Sophia, please go.
Thank you, Susan. I don't know if I can teach, but I'll share.
Share is good. You sharing is great.
My internet connection has been unstable. I've been kicked out of the room twice. So if you can't hear me, let me know. I'll briefly share my own journey through silence. I started practicing silence. Well, I would say I made an intentional decision to become more spiritual in my life and to cultivate spirituality in my daily life and actions, and to look for presence of God in everything that I do and everyone that I meet, almost 12 years ago. And at that time, I started looking for a teacher, a spiritual guide, a spiritual master who would help me through that aspect of my life. And I think I shared it before. I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I have two spiritual teachers, but anyways, I prayed and prayed and prayed for months, and I found my first teacher through my dreams. And then I started working with the teacher. And actually, I found all my teachers through my dreams. But once I started working with my teacher, I took on two spiritual practices through him, and one is silence, and the other is dreams. I have no idea what is the connection between these two. And since Susan, we talked yesterday, I've been thinking about it, and I still don't know what is the connection between silence and the dreams. But what I'll say about silence is that to me, a silence is a tool that helps me connect and communicate better with my own self, with others around me, and with the divine presence in our lives. So that's one thing silence does for me, help me communicate and connect with myself, with others, and divine. And the more silence I practice in my life, the more I feel I'm connected to the deeper realities of life. And the second thing which I have felt important, and I read in my theology, in my tradition, in my scripture of Islam, is that silence is a prerequisite and also a precursor for spiritual ascension, or to receive God's special blessings in our lives. And there are so many different examples of that in our scripture, that, for example, when Prophet Zechariah desired for a boy or a baby or for a child when he was very, very old and his wife was barren, he was asked and told to remain in silence for 3 days before he was given the glad tidings that he would have a child. Similarly, many other stories of how Prophet Moses spent 40 days in silence before he was given the commandments from God, or how Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, went upon a 40-day retreat of absolute silence in the mountains before he met Archangel Gabriel for the first time. What I'm saying is from Muslim scripture, so it might sound a little familiar, but also very different from what you have heard before. So silence is definitely very, very important for those who are trying to walk the spiritual path or communicate with divine or to receive just blessings or strength from divine. In my life, both silence and dreams, they're two big joys. Silence is I think one of the hardest things I do in my life is practice silence. And dreams is, of course, one of the most beautiful gifts or spiritual gifts that I receive. I am going to share, Susan wants me to share one of the practices that I do. So I have a practice called zikr or meditation, which if I do it properly, can take up to 2 hours. I'm not saying I do it every night, but I should, because it really improves my spiritual state and it helps me get clear dreams. And that is one connection I can find between silence and dreams, is that when I'm deeply engaged in my spiritual practice of zikr, and silence is a big part of it, my dreams become clearer, my dreams become more vivid, and I get more guidance and more connection via dreams. So anyways, my daily practice of silence is that I clean myself, the ritual cleaning that we do, washing myself, finding a clean place to pray, and sit down in that clean place to pray. Then I engage in my daily ritual prayer as prescribed in my religion. And then after that, I spend some time in silence, in absolute quiet silence, practicing being observed by divine. So it's more like getting ready to move into dhikr. So I just sit quietly practicing that I'm being observed. And after that, there are many different practices. I'm picking one to share with you. I have this Arabic phrase, which you can call a focus line or a mantra, or however you want to say that. It goes, I hope you can see it on your screen. It goes, La ilaha illallah. So it's 4 words. La, which means no. Ilaha is the word for gods. Illah means but. And Allah is the Arabic word for God, one God. So I take this phrase from my scripture, La ilaha illallah, no gods but God. And I practice it by synchronizing it with my breath. So I breathe out saying La ilaha, or no gods. And when I'm saying it, I imagine myself breathing out or getting rid of all the lesser gods in my life, all the desires or wishes loves that keep me away from God, my love for money, fame, children, family, health, just anything that I deeply desire in my life, anything that I seek in my life other than God. I think about that as a lesser God. And when I say La ilaha, no gods, I breathe that out of my system. And then I breathe in while saying Illallah. And when I breathe in Illallah, but God, I imagine myself filling up with God love, God energy, God's light. And this is what I did in the last 10 minutes. I breathe out La ilaha, and I breathe in Illallah. And I focus on my breath. I focus on these words, and I imagine myself getting rid of all the lesser gods, the things that I love more than God. and breathing in one true God. Sometimes I do it honestly for 5 to 10 minutes. Other times I do it for half an hour or so, because it's very hard to get that focus. I try for 20 minutes to get 2 minutes of that deep, deep focus. And then once I feel very tired and sleepy, I just go to sleep without communications, without any TV, without any other human interaction in my life. I just go to sleep and I hope and pray for deeper guidance, connection, wisdom from divine. And one thing I can tell you, we're out of time, so I'll stop with this. One thing I can tell you, that anytime I do this practice very seriously and intentionally with a lot of focus, mostly 90% of the time, I hear wisdom through my dreams. I get guidance on the things that I'm confused about in my dreams after the prayer. So there has to be a connection there. Susan, I'm sorry, I took longer than I expected.
No, it's so beautiful. So every person on this call has some kind of longing for more of a connection with our true selves and with the divine. And it is your longing that has created this class. It's not Sophia, Sister Deborah, and me. It's the longing that is already in you, that you're already living out in many ways. And I'm really grateful that God made us with that longing and has brought us together in this class. And today I'm particularly grateful that Sister Deborah and Sophia helped share what they've shared. So it's been wonderful to be with you. And we'll see you next week for Dreams and Relationships. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.